For today's training, we're going to be focusing on all things temperatures, as well as thermometer use and calibration. Our goal is for you to come away with an understanding of the danger zone, to learn the different temperature minimums for different categories of food, for you to understand how we use time as a control for food safety on our serving lines, how to learn how to properly take temperatures, and then also how to calibrate your thermometer. Let's get started by talking about the temperature danger zone. The temperature danger zone is between 41 and 140 degrees. It's called the danger zone because that temperature range is where bacteria grows most rapidly. It doubles in as little as 20 minutes. So while that initial 20 minutes may not be that big of a deal, if you're doubling it again in 40 minutes and then another 20 minutes and another 20 minutes, that's when we introduce a whole lot more bacteria and foodborne illness can come into play. So what that means is that we need to cold hold our foods 40 degrees and below, and hot foods need to be held at 140 degrees and above. If you happen to be thinking, wait a minute, I thought that the temperature danger zone went up to 135 degrees. Well, let me explain that a little bit. For a really long time, everybody across the board was following the danger zone as being 40 to 135 degrees. And we here in our department were teaching up to 140, just because, number one, we thought it was a little bit easier to remember, and then we were meeting the standard plus 5 extra degrees hotter. Absolutely no harm in that. So it was easy for me to just kind of teach, hey, we do 140 here in our department, but everywhere else you're going to see 135, just as a disclaimer. But as I was getting ready to create this training, I decided to, just do some checking around, and I happened to notice that now the USDA is also teaching it to 140 degrees. And even when you do a quick Google search, Wikipedia and other resources are also saying 140. But then I went on Maricopa County and everything I saw still said 135. So I took it a step further and I even emailed them, and this is my email here where I was just double checking with them to make sure, and they did say that yes, Maricopa County is still teaching 135 degrees. So just a little summary for clarification. Like us, the USDA is practicing the danger zone up to 140 degrees, as well as a lot of other outside third-party companies and resources as well. But Maricopa County is still practicing 135 degrees. So what that means is when you go to take your food handler's test, which for us is on the Peoria School Food Handler website, you're going to pass it with the answer of 135 degrees. Right here, this is an exact screenshot of you being taught this on the food handler website, and you can see that it says 135 degrees. So again, just remember, we practice 140 degrees in our kitchen, but to pass your food handler's test, it will be 135. I wouldn't be surprised though if Maricopa County eventually does change it to 140 degrees, because they actually have not updated their standards on this since 2013. And since the USDA did this rather not long ago, I think as soon as they do an update, they will probably match up with the USDA standards. Now we're going to move into talking about food temperature minimums by category. One thing to note as we go through these different temperature ranges is that while some of these may not really apply to us in our kitchens as we don't cook some of these foods, this is still really good knowledge to have for basic food safety, to be able to pass your food handler's card test, and for even using it at home. So starting at the top at 165 degrees, you need to cook all raw poultry to that temperature. Now, that's one of those things that even if you've never worked in food service a day in your life, a lot of people actually know that number. It's just been kind of drilled into our heads that chicken needs to be 165, or you kind of hear a lot about it, even from the news around Thanksgiving time. So a lot of people know that number. But one thing that you may not know that also needs to be brought up to 165 degrees is foods that have been previously cooked, i.e. leftovers. So an example of that it might occur in one of our kitchens is that, say you were making hamburgers and you didn't need all the hamburger patties that day. So you cooled them down, and then the next day you're wanting to reheat them for that day's service. The reason we need to bring it up to 165 degrees is because as it was being cooled, even if it was going through the proper cooling process, which actually will be a future training video. As it was going through the cooling process, at some point it did enter that temperature danger zone. So the reason you bring it up to 165 is because then you're killing off any potential bacteria that could have grown during that cooling down process. Bringing it over here to 160 is all ground raw meats, which that only applies to some of our kitchens, our central kitchens that cook it and send it out to our receiving kitchens as well. So not something we do too often, but does occur in some of our kitchens. Also at 160 degrees is eggs being hot held. Moving it down here to 145 degrees. This one honestly does not apply to us too much because it's under whole meats and seafood are in this category. And we aren't exactly, cooking prime rib and shrimp scampi, so it's not really something we have to worry about too much here. But the one that does apply to us the most is this 140 degree range, because that's for any commercially produced, ready to eat food that's going to be hot held. So honestly, most of our food falls under this category. This is corn dogs, chicken nuggets, mini cheeseburgers, things like that. They're fully cooked. We're heating them up and serving them. One of the things that Sandra wanted to make sure that I touched on was that those temperature ranges, those temperature ranges are also for quality, not just for safety. So using chicken nuggets as an example, the chicken nuggets we buy are fully cooked, so they would fall into that 140 degree range. We don't necessarily need to bring them up to 165 because they are fully cooked, and bringing them up that extra 25 degrees may result in kind of rubbery or kind of dry when we're aiming for crispy but juicy. We're not looking for hockey pucks. So just remember, we need to meet the standard as well as making sure that the quality is good. You should see this time as a control sign on our fruit and veggie bars and over by our serving line, wherever we're serving food. If you don't, make sure you reach out to us and that you get one. The reason we have this posted is because this is our notice to both the public and to the health department if they were to show up, saying that we are using time as a control for our foods. What that means is that we are not letting food sit out any longer than is safe. So specifically here, let me pull up my little laser. Specifically here, elementary schools are not setting it out any earlier than 10:30 and they're tossing it by 1:30. High schools out by 10, tossed by 1. That means that using time as our control, nothing is out in the danger zone long enough to be dangerous. It is either being consumed, cooled down properly, or tossed out. Now we're going to move on to thermometers, how we use them, care for them, all that fun stuff. Let's talk about the different parts of a thermometer. Right now, we're going to focus on what I call an old school thermometer. Just your basic, no frills dial thermometer. So here is the face of it. It's pretty self-explanatory. This little hand here will land on whatever the temperature of the food is, yada yada. I think you pretty much get that. What I want to focus on is, might be kind of hard to see, but I'm circling it right now with my laser, is this little notch in the stem of the thermometer. What that indicates is that's the sensing area. Actually, it means that the sensing area is from that notch all the way down to the tip of the thermometer. The reason it's important to know where the sensing area is on your thermometer is because that entire area needs to be inserted into the food in order to get an accurate temperature. In digital models, a narrowing of the stem is also a common indicator of the sensing area. So what I wanted to kind of show you is on this one, you can see it starts to narrow here. So this is the entire sensing area. This one, it starts to narrow here, down to here. So it's kind of funny that between these three different types of thermometers, you can kind of see the evolution of technology. This one, the old school one, it's all the way up here, so it needs all of this here as a sensing area. This one, it only needs this much. And then this one, the most advanced one here, just needs this tiny little bit. Let's talk about taking accurate temperatures. If the food is uneven in thickness, you want to make sure that you are taking the temperature at the thickest part of the food. If the food happens to be even in thickness, you're going to want to put it in the center of the item. If the item is liquid or kind of semi-liquidy, like say like sloppy joe, you're going to want to stir the item first to evenly distribute the heat, because the outside is going to be hotter than that middle. So by stirring it, you're kind of making it even in temperature to get a more accurate reading. Then you're going to wait at least 15 seconds or until that number stops climbing, whether it's a digital readout number or your dial stops moving. 15 seconds or until it stops climbing, and then that's your temperature reading. So let me pose this question to you. What would you do in the case where your sensing area is this big on your thermometer, but your food is only this thick? How would you get an accurate temperature reading in this case? Some of you might say sideways. Just insert your thermometer sideways, and there you go. And then some of you might say stack the food, and both answers are absolutely correct. As long as the entire sensing area is covered, it will totally work. But the type of food that you're taking a temperature of and efficiency might dictate which method you're going to use. So for something like hamburger patties like this, it might just be a lot faster to stack up a few. Same with chicken nuggets. But then there might be something like, I don't know, pizza. I'm just picking something that you're like, hey, stacking this doesn't work. I might have to take it to the side a little bit. Make sure that you're always cleaning your thermometer between uses. In our kitchens, we have two options available. We have these little alcohol thermometer probe wipes that are just individual little wipes. And then we also have sanitizer cups. They kind of just look like a powdered sugar or a Parmesan cheese shaker, honestly, and you fill them with sanitizer and you can put them inside just like so. I actually like to use a combination of the both. I like the alcohol wipe to kind of get some of the debris off, but I also really like the sanitizer cups because it's also a great way to house your thermometers. These, especially these old school ones with their round, heads, they go rolling off tables all the time and it's annoying. So it's nice to be able to keep them in place, and then everybody kind of knows where your thermometers are at. They don't get lost, and as soon as you find the cup, you know where all the thermometers are. But use either or. I like both. Moving on to calibration, which is really important because the temperature reading and what you eventually record is only as accurate as the thermometer that took it. So we need to calibrate our thermometers. So when do we do that? At absolute minimum, we need to do it once a week. But you also need to do it anytime it's been dropped or goes rolling off the table, like those ones I was talking about in the last slide, or if it's been exposed to extreme temperatures. And then how you calibrate them is by the boiling point method or the ice point method. The boiling point method uses boiling water as its control, which boiling water is 212 degrees. It's the more time-consuming of the two methods, and slightly more dangerous because boiling water is a little more dangerous than ice water. The ice point method uses ice water as its control, which is 32 degrees. This method is a little bit easier, faster, and less risky than the boiling point method. Now we're going to work through a little tutorial of the ice point method. First thing you're going to do is fill a glass with ice and add cold water to cover. You're going to stir it up and allow time for that water to become cold and even in temperature. It could take about 3-4 minutes. While you're waiting for your water to get cold, you can start getting your thermometer ready. Right now, we're going to go back and focus again on that sort of old school thermometer. So looking at this thermometer, you're going to see this nut that's at the base of the dial head. This nut right here is what you have to turn in order to be able to calibrate your thermometer. So the cool thing is these thermometers come with their own little sheath that doubles as a wrench in order to move that nut. So you can kind of see this like hole here. So what you do is insert the stem of the thermometer through that hole, and then it will snap in place directly around that nut. It fits perfectly. It's made for it. Once you know that your water is nice and cold, you're going to place the thermometer stem into the ice water, ensuring again that that entire sensing area is submerged. Don't let the probe touch the bottom or sides of the glass. Just let it kind of bob around here in the middle. You're going to hold the thermometer in place until the temperature indicator stops moving. So in this case, until that little dial stops moving around. If the temperature of the water reads 32 degrees, then you're good to go. You don't need to recalibrate it, it's still good. But if the temperature reads anything besides 32 degrees, you're going to need to recalibrate. To do that, you're going to keep your thermometer submerged in the ice water and use that sheath as a wrench to turn the dial whichever direction you need to go in order for it to reach 32 degrees. One thing to note is that each line on this type of dial represents 2 degrees. So you're going to want to do it just that line just over 30 right there. Now let's watch a quick video. It's sped up, kind of TikTok style-ish, showing you how to do this. When it comes to digital models, they can vary a bit in how you calibrate them. So you could always reference the instructions that come with them, but chances are your kitchen isn't hanging on to those. So just some things to look for to help you along is you're kind of just looking for something that says cal. So on this one, it says cal right here, and then hold. So you would hold down this button, and then you can kind of see how these have up and down arrows. So you would hold this button down to get it into calibration mode, and then keeping it in the water, you would use these two buttons to go up and down as needed to get to 32 degrees. This one over here on the right is a little different where it says cal, and it's this tiny little like screw type thing. So you would turn it to get to 32 degrees. But yeah, just look for something like that. You should probably be able to figure it out once you have the base knowledge. One thing to note is that we have food thermometer calibration logs in our kitchens, and this is to prove that we are calibrating our thermometers that minimum once a week that we should be. We should be seeing probably more than the once a week on here because I find it hard to believe that nobody ever drops their thermometer. But yeah, this is where you're going to want to make sure you log all of that information. Let's do a little review. What is the temperature danger zone? Do 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 do. Ooh. 41 to 140 degrees here in our kitchens. But do remember, it's 135 to pass your food handler's test here in Maricopa County. Side note. All right, next up. To what temperature would you cook toasted cheese ravioli to? If you answered 140 degrees, you are correct. That's because it falls into that commercially produced, ready-to-eat, fully cooked foods that we talked about earlier. That 140 degree range, that quite a lot of our stuff is in that range. Here's another one for you. What are we using as our control for food safety on the fruit and veggie bar? We are using time as our control. All right, the little areas that our arrows are pointing to. What does this and then this indicate? Both the notch of the stem and the narrowing of this stem are both indicators of the sensing area on the thermometer probe. At minimum, how often should you be calibrating your thermometer? Once a week is the absolute bare minimum, but remember, anytime you drop it or it's been exposed to extreme temperatures as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you either learned something new or got a nice refresher in temperatures and thermometers.